there is a system that makes the process the inputs, right? That process the inputs and give it as the output as decisions, right? So that system, okay, whoever from wherever it takes inputs and it gives outputs for somebody. So it operates in a particular, okay, environment, right? And that environment is divided into two, intra or extra. What is this intra? Suppose if government of India is taken as a system, right? India is the intra, okay? And whatever outside Indian territory is extra. So if any country, you take Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or United States, that country, that government is taken as a system that processes, right, the inputs and outputs, then that particular within that country is called as the intra, outside is extra. In a federal country, right, Kerala is a system, government of Kerala is a system, within Kerala, okay, is intra, okay, and whatever outside, within India, outside India, it doesn't matter, right? All things become extra. Government of Rajasthan, that is the system, right? So within Rajasthan, that boundary is intra, right? And outside is extra. Where in China, you have throughout the country like that. Here, only a pocket is like that for some reasons, where the system believes that if you open certain things there, that will be used not for giving feedback, but for some, right, some other malicious intention, some other destructive activities, it will be used, right? Where internet in that particular place, it is the belief. It's not that I'm agreeing with that. The system believes that that particular modes of communication will be used, or that particular feedback or communication channel will be used for something else, not for the good for the system, but for the bad for the system, right? So the feedback or the communication channel or the mode is shut in that particular area because system feels that it is bad for it. It will decrease the efficiency of the system. That's why it is. Even China thinks that if you give free hand to this, it will affect the system. That is why it is saying that to maintain the stability and efficiency of the system. Now you can go back to your actual one, where why the functions of the objectives of the system is to make it functions efficiently and also it is stable, right? So system feels that if you allow this feedback in a particular territory or a particular channel, then it's inimical to it. So system shuts that out. You got it? This is how you need to see censoring, right? You need to see cutting off certain things from 4G to 2G. So all these things are aimed at this. Okay, because system always feels that it needs to protect its boundaries. Now you read this boundary as sovereignty, territorial integrity, right? And system is also very much worried about its development. System is also worried about its stability, right? Now you see, you can connect all these things to your previous values, where countries fix certain values for itself and for its people, right? I told you countries fix three things are very, very important for them. Its territorial integrity, its economic development, and its independence to make decisions in the international system. These three things are at the state level. At human level, there are various values that come to play, right? So only if there is a clash between the state values and the individual values, then that is where human rights violations, repression, all those things take. That's why states feels that what is priority, whether a particular individual's right is a priority or states right, that is priority. So it assumes that states rights are priority. So states whatever rights or interests overrides the individual interest, right? That's why if you see even our fundamental rights provisions in the constitution, you always have reasonable restrictions. Article 19, you have freedom to move, but reasonable restriction is there. You have freedom to speak. You have reasonable restriction there. You have freedom of employment or do any trade, but there is a reasonable restriction. Why? Because of this. Because they wanted to make sure that the system survives. End of the day, they wanted to make the system survives. Individuals. There is a saying, you can sacrifice an individual for a village for a country, like that, right? So this is like that. Okay. From systems point of theory, if you look at the constitutional provisions, this also makes sense. That is why, see, you need to apply these provisions. You need to apply in IR, in sociology, in anthropology, in political science. All those things you can apply. You apply to issues. Okay. Anything else? Please go ahead. Anything else? Okay, right. Now, what happened? There was a person called Gabriel Almond. He saw the systems theory that came, right, in 19. When was the book he wrote about the systems theory? David Easton. What was the year? What was the year? The same year some war happened in India. What was the year? Go ahead. What was the year? Anybody can type or you can tell. Please go ahead. Yes, good. 1965. He wrote those magnum opus in two different titles. Gabriel Almond, at that time, decolonization also happening. Many of the third world countries were emerging, right? Then that is why they were thinking, can we apply the systems theory there? There were some issues Gabriel Almond found where systems approach could not explain everything, especially in the newly emerging countries. That's why he wrote a book called Politics of Developing Areas. It's a very small book, but it is a very good read. It's a very good read. We read it when we were in PG. That was a prescribed textbook for us. It's a small, but it's a very good read. You can go and do it. It should be available, right, online. So he was looking at functional point of view because Eastern systems theory, and of course, a lot of people joined. He looked at in terms of system. And of course, he looked at what systems are doing and all, but he couldn't go into details, especially from the point of view of the developing or newly emerging countries. He couldn't actually go because Eastern was stuck in US and he was looking at US system and he was trying to explain from that point of view. That is where Gabriel Almond used these anthropology and sociology from the functions point of view, how the systems function. Because he said each structure does functions and that functions are very, very important for the system's stability or that structures. Structure, he meant institutions, any institution. It's not just political institution. You can see here, these are the various institutions he was looking at, right? So it could be family is an institution, right? You have educational institution. You call them as institutions, right? Educational institution. And you have even religion is an institution, right? These are all institutions and they have people and they have functions. These are the functions they do, right? Each institution has certain functions, right? He was looking at these functions point of view and try to explain in the point of efficiency of these institutions or the structures. He called them as structures also, and how these institutions complement each other. It's very important. These institutions complement each other in the overall stability of the system. This is very, very important. That is why he comes in. Easton was talking about more of political system. But here, Gabriel Almond was talking, of course, he, in his model, which I will go in a while, but he was talking more in terms of how a lot of institutions support the political system in terms of stability and efficiency, right? Now you can see here, this is how the interrelation is, right? So you have a political system, you have economic system, you have family system, you have education, you have religion, and you have science and technology. It goes on like that. So each of them are independent. At the same time, they are interdependent. they are interdependent. They may have autonomy, but they are interdependent in the sense to make sure that they all function autonomously in a very effective manner, but at the same time for a particular cause, for one cause. That cause is to increase the efficiency or the development of the system. Once again, let me reiterate, Gabriel Almond was looking at the emerging areas. He called as emerging areas. Areas here means the countries, right? Right? Or whichever is coming, just like that. Those days there were a lot of instability, right? So he was looking at how to stabilize these systems. That's why he was going intently and looking at saying that it was not just only political system needs to be stable, but for it to be stable, any country or area need to be stable. You need to have all other system should function autonomously, but in an interdependent manner. This was the crux of the structural functional theory, right? So all these things. Now you see, in any country, autonomy of any of these institutions are eroded. Suppose if UGC's autonomy is eroded, what will happen to the quality of the education, higher education? Suppose if NCRT or CBSE's autonomy is eroded, like there are complaints, right? At one point they say that leftist went and encroached on the education textbooks and all. It's all left oriented. Now there is a complaint that all textbooks and all rightist oriented. People are filling up with people, rightist oriented people in all institutions. There are complaints, which means if those complaints are true, then what happens? The autonomy of each of these institutions will get eroded. As a result, overall the system will collapse, or the efficiency of the system will come down. And this is exactly what Gabriel Almond was talking about. So this was his book, right? So this I already told you. All he saw was how several institutions within that particular system performed and how they helped the overall political system to survive. That functions is all about this. So this is what you can see here, right? It could be anybody, a family or a court or something, okay? Anything, it doesn't matter. That overall increase, right, the effectiveness of the system. This is what is the crux of the structural function theory is all about. Now you have two things here. You have structures, you have functions, right? So here the point is the structural refers to any organization, right? That, okay, increase that impacts on us, right? Whatever, as part of the system that impacts in our functioning or our efficiency, those are all structures. That could be families or education or courts, or it doesn't matter, anything. Whichever impacts us, he calls them as structure, right? Whichever impacts. And those structure, how, if they function really well, then if the structures function well, the impact would be positive. If they don't function well, the impact will be negative. This is what all about structural functional in simple. Now let's go into detail. Now I already told you structures means, he said, institutions, right? So I told you two things. One is structure and the function. Structural part, I told you what it is, and functional is its activity, right? Its activity and how the activity is having a particular goal, which means it has some effect. It has some effect. For instance, educational institution function, if you say it is functioning, whether it affects somebody, which means if it affects, it brings some positive change in students, then it is functioning. If it brings negative change also, it is functioning, but it is functioning. Some change it is bringing, then only it is functioning, right? Otherwise it is dysfunctional. If nothing is happening, it is dysfunctional. So something is happening, either positive or negative, it doesn't matter, that is functions. So there are two things here, structures and functions. Structures means institutions and functions means whatever acts performed by that particular institution or the structure, and that is function. That could be negative or positive, latent or manifest, right? You can divide into latent or manifest. Means latent means it need not to tangibly go and do, by its very presence or by its very being there, it is there, right? For instance, you take religion, right? Temple is there, or church is there, or a mosque is there, right? It does a lot of latent and manifest functions, right? Good or bad functions, whatever, right? So this is what it is all about, right? So all you need to understand is point number one: for functions, for political system stability, you need to look at not just that particular one, you need to look at various structures, various institutions within that system that are autonomous but interdependent. This is point number one. Second is, there are two variables here. One is structure, other is function. So structure is equal to how a particular institution, structures means institutions, I told, how it is set up and how it is aimed at bringing certain change. And that is what the functions all about, how that particular structure functions in a manner that affect our activity, whatever it be that affects us. Whether positive, negative doesn't matter, but we all aimed, any institutions are brought to bring in the positive change always, to increase the efficiency or to increase the stability, all those things. Any doubts on this? These are the conceptual aspects. So this is the crux of structural functional. With that, we can go into this particular model. This is the model all about of Gabriel Almond's structural functional. You must have heard about it. So he is actually advanced what this systems approach gave. He advanced it. He went into details of all these inputs and all those outputs. He went to detail because systems theory just said output. It didn't go into detail of output. But otherwise, your environment, feedback, all those things are same. But all he did was, in terms of structural functional, he went into details of inputs and outputs. This is what he went into detail. That is the difference between the systems theory and structural functional. So now in the next class, what we will do is we'll go into details of, right, socialization, interest articulation, political communication, right, and aggregation. All these things will go on the input side, and then output side you have rule making, rule application, and rule adjudication. This is how we will go into details. Any doubts you want to ask? I overshot my time. I want to stop here.